This Parsha podcast is dedicated in honor of our parents, Drs. David and Suzanne Gelb from the Gelb, Goldman, and Shaknovsky families, wishing them and all of Klal Yisrael a Shana Tova Umituka, a good and sweet new year. May this learning also be in merit of Meshulam ben David and Shendel bat David and Avner ben Avram HaKohen and Avram ben Menachem Mendel HaKohen. May their neshamas have an aliyah. Of course, it's the day before Rosh Hashanah, the evening before Rosh Hashanah. It's been a very serious and consequential week. Of course, as you know, there was the wonderfully successful decapitation of Hezbollah over the weekend. Today we had the Iranian barrage of missiles. I'm sure you've seen the videos. It was just outrageous to see the salvos of ballistic missiles descending upon Israel. We saw the videos. I have a lot of family in Israel, in Jerusalem, and elsewhere. The videos I saw, it's just outrageous. Hundreds of ballistic missiles being shot against a sovereign country. But it seems, as far as we know, right now there are no Jewish casualties. I did read about an Arab who died in Jericho, actually an Arab that had fled Gaza or left Gaza and infiltrated into Israel, and actually saw the video. I don't recommend you seeing it. So that seems like it was okay, but simultaneously there was the awful terrorist attack in Tel Aviv that killed 6 of our brethren. We don't know where this is heading to. There's been a lot of push, a lot of voices to finally take out the nuclear program and eliminate that sword of Damocles that is above the whole region's neck, or maybe to destroy the oil infrastructure, the terminals. That after all is the means to fund all of Iran's terror tentacles. I saw a tweet from a former Israeli defense minister. It was in Hebrew, which I understand fluently, but I'm not sure that you do. So this was the translation. The state of Israel must immediately attack Iran, bomb all the oil, gas, and nuclear facilities, and destroy the refineries and dams. And you know what? It's hard to argue against the legitimacy of such strong and resolute action. We don't know where this is going, but regardless, we need protection. We have Rosh Hashanah upcoming, and the fate of our people, the fate of us as individuals, our families, our communities, our nation, our country, and of course, the Holy Land, it's all in the balance. The books are open, and the Almighty is going to determine what's going to happen. So we have to pray our hearts out that the Almighty grants all of us a good year, all of us to be safe and to be protected, and of course to flourish and to be inscribed and sealed in the book of life, in the book of blessing, in the book of great health and great prosperity and only goodness. We all know it's been a very tough year. There's been a lot of pain and suffering for our people in so many different places and so many different ways this year. We need an amazing year 5785. We need a year of salvation and redemption and consolation. We want blessing and only blessing. And we want goodness and only goodness. We need the Almighty to show us favor and to bestow upon us a chut shel chesed, a string of kindness. And we have to do our part to help benefit ourselves and our communities, our people, by, of course, trying to be as righteous as we can and trying to improve ourselves every day. And, of course, the most important part of that is to study the Almighty's holy Torah. As it tell us, Torah magna umatzla, Torah protects and saves. We try to do that every week here on the Parsha podcast. This is the penultimate Parsha podcast of year 8. It's been a wonderful ride. It's the last Parsha podcast of the year, but it's the second to last, the penultimate Parsha podcast of this cycle. The next episode will be in a couple of weeks, because this week we have Rosh Hashanah, which is 2 days, Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbos is Parshas Hazinu, and that's the subject of this podcast. Next week on Shabbos is Yom Kippur, so there is no weekly Parsha, and the following week is is the festival of Sukkot, of Sukkot, and we read V'zos HaBracha, the final installment, the final Parsha. We read it on Simchas Torah, so it's going to be a couple of weeks that we won't have a new Parsha podcast. What am I going to do with all the extra time? Maybe I'll dust off my pickleball racket, or maybe I'll pick up where I left off with my piano lessons, or maybe I'll proceed with all the neglected DIY projects around the house, or maybe, just maybe, I'll finally finish the first draft of my upcoming book. There are lots of options, but there will not be a new Parsha podcast next week. Please God, we will re-release the very memorable Jonah podcasts. Of course, we read the book of Jonah on Yom Kippur, and a few years back we did, I have to say it, we did an amazing podcast where we studied the allegorical interpretation of the Gaon of Vilna, where he goes through the whole book of Jonah on the level of allegory. Of course, the whole Torah can be understood in multiple dimensions and multiple different levels. And all of Torah, all of our literature can be understood as an allegory. I recommend that if you haven't listened to that, to give it a listen. It's, in my slightly biased opinion, a masterpiece. Get a chance, if you have not quite done that, to listen on This Jewish Life. We're doing a little mini-series in honor of the Days of Repentance. We're doing a mini-series on the Gates of Repentance. I recorded the first one this week. And please God, we'll do the next one on Sunday. But of course, our eyes and our hearts are in Israel. And make sure that you include our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land in your prayers on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur, in addition to all the prayers for yourselves, for your families, for your communities. May we all merit a sweet and good new year with the help of the Almighty. It's Parshas Hazinu, a most remarkable Parsha. It's short, only 52 verses. It's only one chapter, and it's almost entirely just the Song of Haazinu. It's an intricate song, a richly woven song, a prophetic song. Each verse is a gem. And you may argue, wait a minute, isn't every verse in the Torah a gem? And you are correct. Of course, every verse in the Torah is a gem. But the verses in this song, like a gem, you have to really study it very carefully to understand it. You need a loop to zoom in as if it were a precious diamond to understand it, because it's a song. It's very poetic, and it's very richly layered in the strata of meaning. And you look at Rashi, very detailed commentaries in Rashi. My study partner actually speculated this is the only parsha that the Ramban's commentary is simpler than Rashi. Every verse is multi-layered. Every verse is interpreted in so many different ways. Rashi tells us everyone refers to the past and to the present and to the future. Every verse reveals an element of the divine system governing our people and our world. But essentially, and the commentaries all harp on this point, the Song of Haazinu encapsulates the whole history of the Jewish people. It's 3,500 years of history in 43 verses. Everything that has happened and will happen to our people, both the large picture and even the more granular details, as I just tell us, is hinted to in this book. And for this very special edition of the Parsha podcast, I tried something new. One of our favorite commentators is the Ohr HaChaim, very deep, very delightful commentator on the Torah, and we've quoted him many times on the Parsha podcast in the past. But I did something this week that I've never quite done, and that is to read the whole commentary of the Ohr HaChaim on the Parsha, cover to cover. And I selected a slew of comments that he makes on some of the verses of the song that I found to be very remarkable, very interesting, very fascinating, and of course, deep and deeper. But again, it's the perfect Parsha to do this because there's so much poetry in the Parsha, so much poetry in the song, the very simple meaning of the verse is often unclear, and it's fascinating to see how he offers a running commentary on the song that's completely unique and novel, and really goes along his own path in a way that's a bit different than the other commentators. He takes his ideas from the Talmud, from the Midrash, from the other sources, and he weaves it into the verse. And there's all sorts of novel interpretations of these verses. And if there are novel interpretations of the verses, there are also novel lessons featured in his commentary. So I read it cover to cover, and I very much enjoyed it. I enjoyed my journey through the Song of Haazinu with the Ohr HaChaim, and I want to share with y'all some comments that I found to be particularly interesting and deep. And it was so rich and so wonderful. It made me consider, maybe we should do this every week. Maybe in year 22 of the Parsha podcast, if we are meritorious, to still be doing this in 14 years from now. We don't know if we'll make it to tomorrow. We don't know what is in store for us, but we hope and pray that the Almighty gives all of us long lives, long and fruitful lives where we can study His holy Torah together in great health and in great spirits. It's an idea. Maybe we'll do this one year. Next year, we have a plan. Year 9, please God, of the Parsha podcast. Torah is your ID, an idea and a dilemma on the Parsha to discuss, to debate, to chew over, to hopefully enrich your Shabbos table. That's our plan for next year. But this experience of reading the Ohr HaChaim cover to cover on our Parsha, it whetted my appetite for more Ohr HaChaim, maybe not exclusively, but more. We'll try to integrate more Ohr HaChaim, please God, into the Parsha podcast docket. Now, I read the whole commentary. Lots of awesome ideas. I had to curate. I didn't include all the comments that jumped out at me. Otherwise, you might be here till Rosh Hashanah. But I selected 5 different ideas. And the first idea, it's in the very first verse. Ha'azinu Hashemayim v'adabeira. Hearken. Pay attention. Listen carefully, O heavens, and let me speak. V'sishma ha'aretz imrei fi. And let the earth hear the words of my mouth. And the Ohr HaChaim begins his commentary with a battery of questions, 6 different questions on this very short verse. It's a short verse. It's got 7 words. And the Ohr HaChaim hits us with 6 questions. And some of them are a bit technical. For example, why does it say, Ha'azinu Hashemayim v'adabeira? Listen, hearken, O heavens, and I will speak. It could have been simpler. Ha'azinu Hashemayim dvarai. Listen, heaven, to my words. Question number 1. Question number 2, we could have saved on some ink. Listen, heaven, as I speak. Listen, earth, as I speak. That could have been shortened. That's what my editor would tell me. Listen, heaven and earth, as I speak. Simple. Why does it separate the heaven and the earth? It talks about the heaven listening, the heaven hearkening, and the earth hearkening, and the earth listening, but it uses 2 different verbs. Ha'azinu, which means to listen very carefully. V'sishma means to hear, to listen. 2 verbs, they mean similar things, but they're different. Question number 3. Furthermore, question number 4. Again, this is typical of what he would do. He just has the first paragraph of his essay, a battery of questions. Question number 4. Why does he instruct the heaven? Listen, hearken. And to the earth, it says, you'll hear it. It's almost like the heaven is being told to pay attention. The earth, you'll hear it. It'll reach your ears. Number 5. In Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, there are 2 words for the verb to speak. One is omer, amira, and one is daber, dibur. And it is a universal principle in the Torah that the word dibur is a harsh usage of that term. And the word omer, amira, vayomer, that's a more soft and gentle form of this idea of speaking. So how come to the heaven it uses the harsh verb va'adaber, and I shall speak, again harshly, and the earth it's imrefi, the words of my mouth, it's more of a lenient, calmer, more gentle verb. Why is it imrefi and not amarai? Lots and lots of questions that he asks, And he offers, as he often does, a variety of approaches. And one of them I found to be very interesting. Moshe begins his magisterial message, his speech to the nation. Not just to the nation that was around then, the nation as it stands today. If it's in the Torah, it must be relevant at all times. So Moshe is also speaking to us. And he's calling out to the heavens. Listen, the heavens, and listen, the earth. What is he referring to? Says the Ohr HaChaim, within each and every one of us, there is a heaven and there is an earth. We are, after all, a fusion of opposites. We're a hybrid. We're a chimera. We're a very unnatural fusion and merging of heaven and earth, of body and soul. And he cites scriptural evidence to the fact that the soul is sometimes described as heavenly, as the heavens, and the body that's described as earthly. Moshe's message that he's going to tell us in our Parsha is to the heaven and to the earth. And on this dimension, this interpretation, it's to the heaven, the soul, and to the earth, the body. Okay. And he's going to use this to resolve all of these subtle questions that he asks. But the lesson, I think, is very profound. Or at least I found it to be profound. When he's speaking to the heavens, when he's speaking to the soul, he says Haazinu, which means to listen. But it's a type of listening where you have to kind of crane your neck and listen very carefully because the sound is quite faint. The soul, the heaven that we have within us. For Moshe to reach it, the heaven must pay very careful attention. The heaven, the soul, is embedded within us. And its ability to interface with the world, to interface with the Torah, to interface with Moshe's message, it's only possible if the soul is very much engaged and it pays very careful attention and listens very carefully. Only then can the messages make its way through the labyrinthine covers and blockages and barriers that suppress the influence of the soul. We are a body and soul. We are a heaven and earth, but there's a hierarchy in this world. The body is very dominant, and the soul, well, the soul's the junior partner here. You could live your whole life without even recognizing or acknowledging the fact that you have a soul. Why? After all, the soul is way more powerful. Soul's eternal. Body, well, it's here today and gone tomorrow. The reason why is because the soul is embedded inside the body. It's hidden very deeply in the realms and the innards of a person. For the soul, for the heaven to hear the message of Moshe, it has to be Haazinu, has to listen very carefully. But once we have the soul's attention, you could speak very harshly to the soul. Why? Moshe is sharing a message from God. For the body, it's very hard to accept the messages from God, says the Ohr HaChaim. The soul is very comfortable with the messages from God. The Torah is like the soul. It's also heavenly. The Torah is compatible with the soul. And the Torah is really not compatible with the body, or at least not initially. And therefore, there's a difference between how you speak to the soul and how you speak to the body. To the soul, to the heavens, va'adaber, let me speak harshly. The soul knows its responsibilities. It understands that it must submit itself to God. It understands the truth. It can handle the truth. The body does not need to listen carefully. V'sishma hears it. Doesn't even need to be paying attention to hear Moshe. If Moshe comes into the room now and starts speaking to us, we will hear him. The words, well, they'll reach our cochlea and they will register in our brain. Not a problem. But that message must be tailored. If you're speaking to the body, it must be tailored. It must be soft. It must be gentle. Why? Because the body naturally is very distant from the concepts of the heavenly Torah. The body, that's the earth. It hears no problem. But it needs to be coddled. It needs to be spoken to gently. Because it's very different than the Torah. It's distant from the spiritual ideals of the Torah. The duality of man has been a foundational theme since the beginning of the Torah. All the way back in Genesis, the beginning of Genesis, Adam's created, and it's obvious, you just read the verses. He's created on two levels. There's the body, which is dust from the ground, and he's created also as a soul. God blew into his nostrils, whatever that means, the soul of life. The Torah is talking to us. Moshe is talking to us. And who is he speaking to? Which part of us? We have two different parts, two different identities within us. The Torah's message, Moshe's message, is for both. We're supposed to hear the message of the Torah on both dimensions. The soul is very receptive to this message. But it's hard of hearing. It's distant. You have to crane your neck. You have to pay attention very carefully. You have to listen very intently. Otherwise, you'll miss it. To foster some sort of sensory connection with the soul, you gotta work really hard. But once you have its attention, you can speak very bluntly, very sharply. It can handle it. The body, on the other hand, it's present. It hears everything. But it needs to be spoken to very softly because the messages of the Torah are foreign to it. That's one of the ways how the Ohr HaChaim resolves this verse. And to me, I found this to be a very powerful insight. And in truth, I know that you've all read my book, Upon a 10-Stringed Harp. This is really the central theme of the book. Torah is natural to the soul. The Torah is heavenly. The soul is heavenly. The soul knows the Torah instinctively. The Torah is the will of God. The soul is the direct handiwork of God. They are spiritually similar. They're cut from the same cloth. You don't need to dilute it. You don't need to dilute the intensity of the message of the Torah for the soul. You don't need to sugarcoat it and to explain it and tiptoe gingerly around the Torah's messages. It could handle the full force of the Torah. And therefore, Hazinu HaShamayim, the heavens, the soul, Va'adabeira, I will speak to you in a very clear and blunt and cogent and direct manner. The body has a completely different persuasion. It is present. You don't have to work so hard to just convey the message, but the content and the nature of the message must be tailored to its sensibilities. To it, the Torah is foreign. You speak very gently, or else there won't be a connection between the body and the Torah. Now, to the degree that we become more of a soul in our balance of power of body and soul, Torah will become more natural and more intuitive. But herein lies the challenge. It's challenging because the soul, our ticket to elevation and transformation, to transcendence, you got to work really hard to get the message. You got to listen very carefully. Otherwise, the soul is just not part of the picture. What an idea to get us started in our exploration of the Ohr HaChaim's commentary to Parshas Hazinu. Let's proceed with the second idea. In verses 7 and 8, Moshe tells the nation, Zechor Yemos Olam, remember the days of yore. Remember the past. Ask your father what it was like. Ask your elders. Let them tell you about the past. History, it's very important. It's a mitzvah for us to learn and to inquire about our history. And which events does it refer to? Behanchel elyon goyim, when God dispenses, so to speak, the legacy of the nations. And he divides up humanity. And he establishes the boundaries of the nation. Again, we're trying to translate it here. These very poetic and multi-layered words in Hebrew. It's not, we don't have a direct, the perfect translation does not exist. But the verse tells us that God divides up the boundaries of the nations, lim mispar b'nei Israel, to the numbers of the sons of Israel. The number of nations, Rashi tells us, matches the number of Israelites. Well, how so? At the end of Parshas Noach, when it talks about the aftermath of the dispersion, the Tower of Babel episode, there are 70 different individuals that spawn nations. Now that number appears again when Jacob descends down to Egypt. He descends with 70 souls. And this is being hinted to in our verse. There are 70 nations and 70 languages. And corresponding to those nations and those languages, we have 70 souls of the sons of Israel. The number of descendants of Jacob that went out to Egypt is 70. 70 souls correspond to 70 nations. Now this is a major theme in Jewish history. Well, we're one nation, we're like a sheep surrounded by 70 wolves, and we have 70 souls that square off against these 70 nations. Now this is hinted to in this verse, that the division of the world into 70 nations, that matches the 70 souls of the Jewish people, the 70 original souls, when they descended down to Egypt. Now the Ohr HaChaim, he opens up before us an entire Kabbalistic system. And I read it. And I said, I don't know what I'm reading, but I can read, and I have a basic rudimentary understanding of Hebrew. I'm not claiming I know what he's saying and all the secrets that he's hinting to. It's obviously very deep stuff. But after all, that's our mandate, year 8 of the Parsha podcast. Deep and deeper. So let's jump in. He starts off by telling us a major principle. All the handiwork of God. Zeh leumas zeh. It's all this corresponding to that. This opposite that. Good and bad are in balance. This is an idea we've spoken about many times. If there's a Moshe, there has to be a Bilam. Has to be. There always has to be balance. If we have the tablets from the Almighty, we have to have also the golden calf. Only once we have such a level of holiness is such impurity feasible. They're always in balance. The essence of free will, it presupposes that there's balance. Otherwise, it's not quite free. If we're playing with weighted dice, well, it's not free will. Continues the Ohr HaChaim. That's an idea that we've seen before. When I read this, I'm like, oh, you have my attention now. V'chol nefashos shenivraim, all the souls that were created, the Almighty planted them in one of two trees, a good tree and a bad tree. When I read that, I said, okay, we got something interesting. There are two trees, and the souls, well, they're planted in these trees. And there's a good tree, and there's a bad tree. And he tells us the good tree, that's Adam. And it's implied it's Adam before his sin. And the bad tree, that is Uncle Sam. That is some other dark matter Adam, whatever that means. But Adam sinned. And that caused a glitch in the matrix, a glitch in the system, because good and bad now became intertwined. Adam was the good tree. And in that state, he would have spawned only good souls, bereft and empty, cleaned and cleansed of any bad. But once he sinned, he absorbed a little bit of that other tree. And now there's bad mixed with good. And now this tree, it's a problematic tree because it's got good, it's got bad, and what kind of fruits are coming out? Some good, some bad, it's a mix. But there was another fruit. Again, this is all Kabbalistic, and I'm just reading. I'm not claiming to understand anything. I found it interesting. There was a fruit that came out of this tree that was only good. And like fruits that come out of trees, you could plant a new tree with every fruit. Every fruit gives you a coupon for more fruits. And there was a process of creating a new tree, or cleansing the good tree, so that it spawned only good fruits. And who is this special person that restores, so to speak, that equilibrium of having one completely good tree? That's Jacob. Again, I know for sure that we're treading into Kabbalistic territory. We don't know what we're talking about, but this is interesting. Jacob is a reenactment of Adam before his sin. And he quotes the Talmud and the Zohar that Jacob was a spitting image of Adam before his sin. When the Talmud tells us that people looked the same, it means that their spiritual essence is the same. Jacob looked like Adam before his sin because he was spiritually like Adam before his sin. So we have a new tree, and it has 70 branches. And when it went down to Egypt, it was this entity that went down to Egypt. And there always has to be a balance that's maintained. So if there's a 70 branch tree of good, there must be a 70 branch tree playing for the other team. And that's what's hinted to in this verse. The nations, these 70 nations, that corresponds to the sons of Jacob. The tree of goodness that has branches of goodness and holiness and purity, that was planted, that was developed and perfected by Jacob. That is the 70 that can square off against the other tree, and those other 70 forces, those 70 nations. And the goal, continues the Ohr HaChaim, is that every dimension of this 70 branch tree should overpower, should crush, should eliminate the evil twin, the other 70 branch tree. Fascinating, powerful. We're clearly out of our league. This is clearly the esoterica. This is arcane, but it's fascinating. Every soul corresponds to a nation. The good soul has to marshal the righteousness and goodness to overcome an element of evil that corresponds to it. It's a very lofty, very powerful interpretation. I think it, maybe one lesson that we could take from it, it clarifies for us what our national mandate is. Our mandate is to determine the fate of humanity, and by extension, the fate of all of finite existence, by developing and harnessing and nurturing and preserving and asserting that goodness in the world, and thereby overcoming and overpowering the corresponding system. They're balanced. And it's up to us to determine which way things will go. Amazing, profound insight. But there's more. In verse 11, we read how the Almighty treats us like an eagle rousing its young. A few years ago, we had a very special episode just on this verse where God is compared to an eagle, metaphorically, of course, who's rousing his young. And how does an eagle rouse its young? By doing it very gently, by hovering over the nest, by spreading over its wings. And Rashi, of course, tells us that it doesn't frighten. Imagine you wake up. I should try this with my kids, maybe. Yeah, the massive eagle comes, you get shaken out of bed. It's probably scary. You're perched on some nest, hundreds of feet in the air, and you're a baby little eaglet, and suddenly there's this massive eagle that descends upon you. That's not how it does it. It does it gently, makes noises, and slowly, very gently, nudges its young awake. The Ohr HaChaim takes us in a little bit of a different way. What happens when, God forbid, the nation of Israel, they veer away from the path of God? And they violate the will of God. God doesn't give up on us. Oh no. He tries to nudge us back to the proper path. And how does he do that? So we read over here that it's like an eagle. An eagle doesn't swoop down, descend upon the nest with the full force of its ability and power. It does it slowly and gently. The Almighty is always sending us messages. And if we're veering away from the path, we are going to get messages. And it's going to start very gently. A little nudge, a little elbow, a little massaging us back to the path. The Almighty is like an eagle gently rousing its young. And he cites the Midrash. The Midrash says that the tsaras, which is a message from God, read about it, of course, in the book of Leviticus. There are 3 types of tsaras, one on the house, one on the garments, and one on the person's own body. And Rashi there explains that there's a progression. It starts off on your house. Get the message. It's not on you, but learn from what you encounter. If you don't take the message, it comes a bit closer. It now infects your garments. If you don't take that message, the scale is raised and it hits your very person. This is a lesson, a masterclass in divine treatment. God treats us gently, like an eagle rousing its young. He's sending us messages. He's trying to wake us up from our slumber. We may be asleep. We may be in need of redirection, of a reset. How does he do it? He does it like a parent almost. And he does it in a way that is gentle. And he doesn't scale up all the way to the nth degree until all other options have been exhausted. And then the Ohr HaChaim adds another thing. God doesn't challenge us in ways that we cannot handle. God only gives us what we can handle. Very powerful idea. God's waking us up all the time. Even when we're awake, we're a little sleeping. We talk about the soul. The soul's like within us. It doesn't really hear the messages. It's asleep. Part of the reason why we blow the shofar. It's to wake us up from our slumber, from our sleep. God does it in a way that we can handle and not anything more. The verse proceeds to tell us that God, or the eagle, extends its wings. God nudges us. Everything bad that happens to us is a divine nudge. And the objective of these nudges, the intention behind it, is to get us to take the message and to repent. And if we do, his hand, God's hand, so to speak, is already extended to accept us in repentance. God's like a parent. He loves us, but he needs to rouse us from our slumber. And he nudges us awake gently, softly. And he starts off with small wake-up calls. Hopefully, we won't need anything harsher. And when he rouses us, he's ready to receive us. He's extending, so to speak, his hand, like the mother eagle, to take us and to bring us to where we need to go. In verse 12, we read another idea. Hashem badad yanchenu ve'ein imo el nechar. God alone guides us, or guided them, and there's no el nechar, no foreign God with him. Of course, all the commentaries interpret it in their own way. Rashi, for example, tells us that Hashem badad yanchenu, God leads us in the wilderness when we were alone. And we were safe because we were being protected by him. In this context, the word yanchenu means to guide the people. Ve'ein imo el nechar, and none of the foreign gods were with him that could have possibly challenged him. No other god had the strength, had the ability to go up against God, to, so to speak, wage a war against him. That's what Rashi says. And of course, in Hebrew, the words have so much subtlety and so many dimensions. The word badad, it means, in this context, it means alone or solitude, like bedidus. but it also means united. The same Hebraic root, like we say, like united as one, like there's one sole solitary entity and it's united. So the Ohr HaChaim, he tries to interpret the verse. He does interpret the verse. The word badad means united. God, when we are united, will tolerate idolatry. The way he interprets the verse. Hashem badad. Hashem will treat us when we are united. Yanchenu, he will forgive us, will allow us, will tolerate Einimo. He will not punish us, El Nechar, for our sins of idolatry. Now, this is all based upon a midrash. The midrash says that when the Jewish people are united, even if we have idolatry amongst us, God will hanachla, will tolerate it. And that's how I interpret this verse. When the nation is badad, when they are united as one, God, yanchenu, he will forgive us. Ve'ein imo el nechar, and God will not consider the fact that we have this terrible sin of idolatry. This is a very stunning statement. The worst sin, or at least certainly one of the worst sins that we could possibly do, the most egregious of crimes, is idolatry. And he's citing the Midrash that even if we do such a terrible transgression, such a mutiny and rebellion against God, when we are united as one, we're impervious to any harsh divine punishment. When we're together, we can be sinners of the worst kind. God will not consider that. God's like a parent. What does a parent want more than anything else? To see their children united and happy with each other. If we're united and we're happy with each other, this is what it's saying over here. An amazing and powerful interpretation and lesson. If we are united, we are protected. I think this is a very powerful lesson, and a very topical lesson today. We all want protection. And we're all different. You got 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Unless you're like a Walby, then there's only one opinion. It's what daddy says, right? Whatever daddy says, that's the truth. No, of course, you haven't seen our kids. We're notoriously balkanized. Got so many different types of Jews. And we're all sure that we're right. It's like the national sport of our people is debate. And anyone who's more religious than me is a fanatic. Anyone who's less religious than me, well, they're a heathen. They're a heretic. I'm just a perfect blend. That, maybe it is true, but it's a very dangerous thing. We don't want to dissociate or alienate any of our brothers. Because here we're told, this is again the Midrash, and the Midrash that the Ohr HaChaim is weaving into the verse. When we are bada, we're united as one, God will forgive us and not punish us even for terrible sins. A very important interpretation and lesson. And finally, the 5th idea comes already after the song at the end of the Parsha. We read about the preparation for the passing of Moshe. God tells Moshe, Be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the middle of the day, ascend the mountain. Ascend Mount Nebo, in the land of Moab, opposite Jericho, and witness and see and visualize the land of Canaan that I'm giving to the nation of Israel as an inheritance. And there, verse 50, we read, Umus bahar, and die on this mountain that you are ascending, and gather yourself to your nation. Die like Aaron died on Mount Hor, and he was gathered to his nation. So there's 2 remarkable interpretations here in the Ohr HaChaim on this verse 50 here. First of all, it says umus bahar, and die. So the conjugation of the verse is like actively die. We don't actively die like that. We don't do that. God takes our soul. You want to take it yourself. We don't actively die. So the Ohr HaChaim is questioning over here, why does the verse imply that, again, the conjugation of the verse says umus, and you should die. So he cites an idea. I never saw this idea before. And he doesn't source it. Ein hakadosh baruch hu lokech nefashos chasidav. God, the Holy One, blessed is He, does not seize the souls of His pious ones, ella lirtzonam, only if they agree. And therefore God is saying, you have to choose, you have to opt in, you have to sign the line that is dotted. You have to accept the terms. Or else I'm not going to take you. That was very, very interesting to me. Now, he offers a second approach to this verse, which may explain why Moshe agreed. The Ohr HaChaim points out that in this verse it says, Umus, and I, Bahar, on the mountain, Asher ata oleh shama, that you are ascending over there, ve'e'asev alamecha, and gather to your nation. There's a lot of words to describe the fact that Moshe is going to die on this mountain. Of course, there's nothing that's thrown in just as filler material in the Torah. So the Ohr HaChaim has a second approach to explain what's the lessons in each one of these words. Umus, you're going to die. Why? There are 3 reasons why Moshe is dying. In the first interpretation, he told us, well, Moshe has to agree to it. Maybe this is the reason why Moshe did agree. But regardless, there are 3 different rationale for the death of Moshe. And the first one is Bahar, on the mountain. What does it mean? So he cites the Talmud. Talmud tells us, where is this mountain? Mountain of Voa, where is that? Well, the verse tells us it's in the land of Moab, opposite Jericho. What happened in the land of Moab? Do you remember what happened in the land of Moab? Do you remember the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar? Do you remember Parshas Balak? In the land of Moab, the Jewish men sinned with the daughters of Moab, with Moabite women. And they also did idolatry, a particular type of idolatry called Baal Peor. That was in the land of Moab. That's exactly where Moshe is buried. And the Talmud tells us this is not a coincidence. This is where this force of idolatry resides. And this force of idolatry really is an indictment on the Jewish people, because after all, the Jewish people, they cleaved to Baal Peor, the verse tells us. And therefore this idol, this idolatrous force, can serve as an attacker to the nation. The nation could suffer tremendously because of their idolatry with Baal Peor. To stave off any attack from Baal Peor, Moshe was buried right there on that mountain. Every time this force raises up its head, so to speak, to go swallow up the Jewish people for their crimes of idolatry, the first thing it encounters is Moshe. And once it sees Moshe, it melts away. It skulks away and returns to its place. That's why Moshe is told, I need you to die right over here on this mountain, because you will quell and squelch the indictments of Baal Peor. You will rebut and repel the influence of Peor, that idol the nation worshipped. That's the first reason why Moshe is being told to die on the mountain. And the verse continues, Asher ata oleh shama, that you are ascending to there. Moshe's death, it's on the mountain, but he's also ascending. Says the Ohr HaChaim, there are certain opportunities that are infeasible to any being that is still alive. It is a soul captured in a vessel called the body. So long as the body is part of the equation, the soul is limited in what it can access. The soul wants to go back to where it came from, and it's being held back by the body. The soul wants to experience these incredible experiences that are possible only for the soul to experience, but it can't do it so long as it is being dragged down by a body. It wants to go ascend to the higher realms. It can't because of the body. And therefore, this is the second rationale. Go up to the mountain. Okay, mountain, that's to stave off Baal Pa'ar. Asher ata oleh shama, where you're going to elevate from. You're going to unlock previously infeasible opportunities. There are realms and dimensions that are completely out of our league so long as we're here. So this is a way to entice Moshe almost. If Moshe has to sign the line that's dotted, has to agree to die, well, then maybe this will be persuasive. And finally, Ve'asef el amecha, and gather to your nation. And again, the Ohr HaChaim cites a midrash that there was a great benefit to the nation that Moshe died on the east side of the Jordan River and didn't cross over to the land of Israel proper because he stayed there with his nation. Who is his nation? When is the people called the nation of Moshe? Do you remember? We've been through the Torah almost. When is the nation called the nation of Moshe? In Exodus chapter 32. That's when the Jewish people did the golden calf. God tells Moshe, go down. Kishiches amcha. Because your nation has become corrupted, has done terrible things. This nation is Moshe's nation. And where are they? Well, they're here. They all died before the crossing of the Jordan. And what's their fate? Yes, the descendants of these people are going to enter the land and are going to flourish in the land, and all's well. What about those people who died and were buried on the east side of the Jordan? Moshe is going to gather to his people. He's going to gather all those people and bring them with him. Moshe, well, there's no greater candidate for Olam Haba. There's no greater candidate for resurrection. Who's he coming with? He's not coming alone. He's coming with his nation. And gather your nation. They're all coming with you. And it's only thanks to you that they could be drawn out of where they are now and brought to the afterlife, to Olam Haba, together with you. A third reason why Moshe needs to die. And maybe these reasons were why Moshe agreed, like the Ohr HaChaim tells us. You have to agree to it if you're righteous. You have to sign off on this. This is not like what we do. I agree to the 950 pages that no one ever read. Now you could feed it to the AI. Find me the problems with this contract. But even that, 1% of people do that. Moshe had to actually agree. He had to know what was in store for him. And here we have 3 different reasons the Ohr HaChaim tells us. Go up to the mountain. You'll save the nation by thwarting the attacks of Baal Pa'ar. Go up and die. You'll reach heights that you cannot reach when you're still a mortal. A body harboring the soul. Ve'asef alamecha, gather your people, gather the nation, and bring them with you when you come back to Olam Haba. You could save this nation that's your nation. You could save them and bring them with you to the afterlife. The 5th and final piece from the Ohr HaChaim that we are studying here in Parshas Hazinu. I think there's some incredible ideas, some incredible lessons, some very powerful lessons, some very novel ideas. Some ideas we've seen before, but some of them are brand new. I absolutely loved it. This was a fun experience for me. I hope you enjoyed it as well. In less than 24 hours, it's already Rosh Hashanah. I'm recording this now. It's 11 o'clock p.m., 11:10 p.m. here, Central Time. It's Rosh Hashanah Eve. We still have a lot of work to do to get ready for the high holidays, but, it's a shorter week and don't have as much time. And lots of work. Thank you, Hashem. But it's a great privilege to record the Parsha podcast and to release it, please God, ahead of time, ahead of Rosh Hashanah. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to again wish you a ksiva v'chsima tova. May you be inscribed and sealed in the book of life. May you be recipients of only goodness and blessing this year. May you and your family be blessed with all the good things in life. Happiness, harmony, health, all sorts of health, stability, joy every day. The ability to flourish safety, only goodness for you, for your family, for your community, for all of us. And of course, all of our brothers and sisters, especially those in the Holy Land that are going through all sorts of difficult challenges. We hope it's a better year for them as well. May the Almighty answer all of our prayers. May we merit to coronate him as king on Rosh Hashanah. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Rosh Hashanah, a splendid Rosh Hashanah, an elevating Rosh Hashanah, a meaningful Rosh Hashanah, and of course, a Shabbos that is adjacent to it. Please God, we'll talk again next week, next year. Well, actually, no, we just said we're not going to talk next week, but next episode. And of course, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.